All right, so welcome to once again doing this YouTube thing. So there seems to be a lot of conversation kind of going on about demons and hell and things of that nature. Um, and I figured, well, why not actually go down and actually talk about what a demon is, like actually what a demon is. In order for us to understand what a demon is, we need to kind of unsubscribe to the Judeo Christian idea of what a demon is and go farther back and look at where the word actually comes from. Okay, so the modern equivalent of demon comes from the Latin daemon, which is spelled Daemon, which is derived from the Greek daemon, which is Daimon. Now, the meaning of daemon from the Greek understanding is godlike, God, power, fate. It refers to lesser deities or guiding spirits, tutelary deities, basically lesser kind of godlike spirits that are for the most part beneficial. There is, however, a mention of Charis, which are also important because Charis are the deadly kind of death spirits that were released from Pandora. Um, Now, there's an idea within Greek that people transformed into daemons by the will of Zeus to serve the living benevolently as guardian spirits, known only by their acts. They were invisible, you couldn't see them. So they weren't there, but you could see their actions, which kind of lends itself to the idea of, ghosts moving and throwing things around, right? So the idea here is what we have to do is we have to look at the history of particular things and kind of throw ourselves back into it a little bit more, right? And then kind of translate it over and how all of these things kind of come about. So the idea here is that people were transformed into daemons by the will of Zeus, which would kind of lend itself to the idea of malevolent spirits that kind of could haunt a house and move things and throw things. But these were spirits that were, brought about to, help and guide and kind of show kind of like a better way of doing things, to the people that they served. And which is why people, when they passed away, when they died, they were converted into daemons. And then they were assigned to people. They weren't just like kind of like randomly created, right? Which again kind of lends itself to the falling from heaven, right? So the idea, the Christian idea of going to heaven, you die and you rise and you go to heaven. And then, there are angels that fell that were considered the demons, right? So if you die and you go to heaven and then you come back, you're falling from heaven. Right? So there's that aspect of it. Now, Plato actually spoke of a kind of daemon which existed within a person from birth, which was there were particular people that were gifted, um, this guiding spirit from the day that they were born. Most weren't. Now, this lends itself to the Judeo Christian idea of possession, that a demon, could live inside of you. Now, obviously, there's a differential here, right? The Judeo Christian idea is that it enters your body and it controls you and tries to kill you and steal your soul. And Plato's kind of idea behind it is that this thing lived in you, from the get go, right? But it was, again, benevolent, it wasn't malevolent. Now, the modern Judeo Christian idea of what a demon is actually didn't really come about until like the early second century. Now, funny thing here, as Christians generally do, meanings change to fit their narratives. And we've seen this with pagan holidays. They take, the Christmas, Easter, Stara, you know, solstices and equinoxes, things like that. And the traditions and the things that that we do, that we most people believe to be Christian, are actually pagan rituals and ideas. So, another one for the Christians, right? So, but yeah, so the early second century Judeo-Christian, like the Judeo-Christians kind of converted the word over daemon to demon, right? Or kind of like, the Latin root to that daemon, to be a malevolent spirit, something that's evil and does bad things, right? And again, is known for their acts that are generally, you don't see them, um, you know, all of these different types of things. So when we go through the history, the actual history of, and there's a lot more that we can kind of dive in on this and kind of look into it at detail. Yes, in ancient Greek, there were kind of two different types of daemons. There were ones that like causing mischief, kind of like, I guess you could say they would be kind of like the equivalent of, kind of like, what's the word I'm thinking of? The Norse pagan, Loki, right? Is kind of like they like to kind of play tricks and things like that. So there's kind of that separation, and then you've got Charis. Charis were released by Pandora. They were death spirits. They weren't gods. They weren't deities. They were death spirits. They were present during violent death. Anytime there was a battlefield, anything like that, And so the idea here is what's kind of happening is you have a word that means one thing, and it's important that we look at the meaning, right? It's you could be saying, well, that's the ancient Greek translation. We're talking about, the Judeo-Christian one. It's important that we look at the word, because the thing is when we notice things about the Judeo-Christian faith, and if you're probably wondering, well, why am I talking about the Judeo-Christian faith? Because all the people that are talking about demons don't subscribe to, the religion. The thing here is you cannot sit there and say that, well, I'm not a Christian, I'm not a Catholic, but I believe in angels and demons. And I believe that the Judeo-Christian idea of what angels and demons are is true, but I'm not a Christian. Essentially, like, you're removing the God idea. You're taking out, God, and saying, okay, well, angels and demons exist. But then again, other contradiction is then you talk about Jesus. Jesus doesn't exist outside of the Judeo-Christian pantheon. There are absolutely no scholars, no historians at all that even mention anyone resembling Jesus, or our idea of what we believe Jesus to have been as a person, the things that he did during that time period. There was one person that was paid by the church to write, kind of like a record of Jesus existing, and that's been proven, has been debunked hundreds of times and long time ago. So outside of the Judeo-Christian pantheon, Jesus doesn't exist. So you can't say that Jesus is your guide, you believe in Jesus, but you're not a Christian, you're not a Catholic, but you also believe in angels and demons as the Judeo-Christians believe in it. And the reason this is important is because we do know and we do understand that throughout history, the Judeo-Christians, or Christians and Catholicism, have stolen so much through history and manipulated it into their doctrine. And the idea that we're looking at right now, with this conversation about demons, is based in Judeo-Christian belief. The idea that what we're talking about of demons is based in the Judeo-Christian belief. Therefore, we have to look at where the word comes from, where the word demon comes from. What does the word demon mean? Right? Um, so we have to kind of look at those particular points. Otherwise, you're only getting half truths. You're not looking at the whole story. You can't have one piece without the other. The piece that you want to believe in right now doesn't exist without this one back here. It doesn't. It simply does not exist. It's not a thing. You can't have. It's the whole concept. You can't have your cake and eat it too, right? It's a beautiful cake, but you can't keep it and eat it. It's either you keep it or you eat it. You can't have both. Like you can't have one without the other, right? Um, so this is why we're kind of looking at kind of like the Greek meaning, which then from the Greek meaning we go to Latin, and then from Latin we get into kind of like the Judeo-Christian idea, things like that. And again, the modern idea of what a demon is didn't come about until the early second century. There has always been good and bad spirits throughout history in all different pantheons. And the reason why, there's always good and bad, in spirituality is because there's always good and bad in humans. Like we are capable of great good and we are capable of great evil. And it is only to make sense of these things, to apply that to, the divine. Right? In many pantheons, I mean, the gods were almost as equally as fallible as human beings were, right? And that was due to the fact that we couldn't understand the idea of perfection, right? That something that existed, could be perfect until, really kind of like you start kind of getting into, Judeo-Christians, right? You get into the Judeo-Christians, and now we're talking about God is perfect, God is good. And even then, even in their own scripture, God is not perfect. God is not 100%. I talked about this last time, in the last video, that, God was fallible. God was, he fell into jealousy, right? And by falling into jealousy, he subscribed to, one of the seven deadly sins, which was, kind of like being egotistical, right? Kind of like full of yourself, being humble, right? You would think that, God that requires his subservience to be, humble would be humble himself. But, we don't see that. God is the ultimate expression of human arrogance, in my personal opinion. And furthermore, these people that are coming about that, keep spouting demonology, demonologist, that don't understand the full history of where the word even comes from, right? You like to see, people that, throw around, the name of the book for the Lesser Key of Solomon. They like to throw that around and make it like, it's like, ooh, I know a word that a lot of other people don't know. It's like, ooh, what is that? And it's like, I'm honestly very, tired of, people kind of throwing out half of the story. Or they read a modern equivalent and think that they know everything. I don't know everything. I will never know everything. There's always going to be more that I can learn. There's always going to be more that I can understand. And I'm open to learning those things. And I want to learn from everybody that comes across here. Anybody that leaves a comment, things like that. I'm open to learning. The one thing that I refuse to do, and at least I try not to do, is to be condescending in my ideas, because ideas are constantly changing and constantly growing. In the light of new evidence, ideas can change. It's life. It's just how it is. But I think it's important, if we're going to be talking about demons, that we talk about where, first and foremost, the name comes from, because that's important. It's important to understand the history and where that comes from. And so that's kind of where it comes from. It comes from kind of like ancient Greek, as most things do that we modernly use. coffee break. Because for those that don't know, it's 5 o'clock in the morning right now, right? And so now another thing that's kind of interesting, and if you're wondering, yes, I'm looking at notes because I had to refresh the memory here. Plato's in the Symposium, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I know that my pronunciation, certain things here are absolutely horrendous, and I apologize to anybody out there that is, um, big into that. The priestess Distima teaches Socrates that love isn't a deity, but rather a great daemon. Love. Furthermore, everything demonic is between divine and mortal. They transport and interpret human things to gods and the divine things to man. There is very little of the original word demon, daemon, which is negative. Now, again, I'm not denying that even in the Greek pantheon and Greek mythology, there are good and bad daemons. But the Judeo Christian version of a demon is more closely related to the Charis, these death spirits, than it is to an actual demon. And so we kind of have to kind of start understanding that, right, to start out with. Then also, another thing I wanted to mention in this video, upside down crosses. So for people that supposedly know so much about demons and evil and Satanism and things like that, they seem to know so much. So for those of you that don't know, the upside down cross became a thing with St. Peter. St. Peter, when he was crucified, refused to be crucified in the same way that Jesus was crucified because he believed himself not to be worthy to be crucified in the same way that his Lord was crucified, and was therefore crucified upside down in respect to Jesus. The upside down cross, even all you full on Satanists out there, grant you, it's still fun to wear an upside down cross and piss people off because everybody just freaks out because they don't know, the upside down cross is actually probably one of the largest respects that you could give to Jesus, because it's basically to sit there and say that you don't view yourself worthy, essentially, which I guess is where they kind of derive the kind of like the negativity, right? It's like somebody that wears an upside down cross is somebody that is not worthy of Jesus, right? So I guess that's probably where they're deriving their negativity or their negative connotation to it. But it isn't directly satanic in any way, shape, or form. It's actually very, very white light, very, positive thing, essentially. Even like early depictions of Jesus, early Jesus in artwork, they use an inverted star. It's there's just so much that people like to only talk about, like modern equivalents, and they don't like to go far enough back into history and end up looking like fools when they start to say these things, because they don't know. And I will probably never say everything that I know. I guess, I'll give tidbits here and there, within context, right? Yeah, that's the important thing. It has to be within context, is the idea. But I just think it's absolutely ridiculous the amount of people that come across and act like, yeah, I know everything. I know this and I know that, and this is this, and you don't know this, and you're not going to know this until this happens. It's like, calm down. Sit down, please. Relax. Okay? There is a lot you don't know. I don't know. There's a lot we don't know. So can we all stop acting like we know everything? I mean, I know it's probably not a good look for me on YouTube to sit here and be saying, well, I don't know everything. But I find it to be so much more foolish, arrogant, and condescending for me to sit here and pretend and act like I know everything when I don't. I'm imparting what little knowledge I have or what understanding I have of the situation, you know, in this particular platform, in this particular way, because nobody's talking about this stuff. Nobody's talking about, where all of this comes from, where all of this, again, which is another reason why I call myself a philosophical Satanist. I'm not a full on Luciferian, right? I'm not even a full on Satanist, because the thing is I still believe in a higher power, something greater than myself, right? To be a full Satanist, you are your higher power, right? The power and the magic that you wield comes from yourself. It comes from within you. Like that, your energy is the energy that manipulates the world around you. For me, it doesn't work that way. Yes, I have energy. Yes, my energy can be used to connect to a larger energy, which can then be used to manipulate, the world around me. And I know there's going to be some people who are going to pop off and be like, oh, what's manipulation, right? That's a demon thing, manipulation. Manipulate just means to change. You're manipulating something to bend it, to move it, right? To change it, right? What do you think you do when you pray? Right? If you believe in God, you're a Christian. You kneel at your bed at night, you put your hands together and you pray to God to give you strength, to get you that brand new car, to give you an opportunity to get money to buy a house, or so you can pay your rent and you don't live on the streets. You are asking higher power to manipulate a potential course of events to benefit you. Same damn thing. The only difference is that I believe that I play a more active role in the manipulation, right? You trying to wash yourself of all potential responsibility because you're just asking God to do it. Let's be realistic, shall we? Right? In this day and age, it's a game of semantics. That's the game we're playing right now. And that's what we're talking about, semantics. But in order to talk semantics, you kind of have to understand where the words are coming from that you're using and understand the history and when things started to change and what they originally meant. Because the Judeo-Christian idea of a demon didn't exist until around the 2nd century. So take it with a grain of salt. Take it for what you want to take it for. That is going to be it for today. If you guys want something a little bit more in depth, let me know. And I guess I'll see you guys in the next one.